I stood in that courtroom without a lawyer. No one beside me, no one behind me, just me, a folder of papers, and a man who wanted to take everything my father left behind. My uncle sat across the room in a suit that cost more than my father's funeral. His attorney kept smiling at me, that kind of smile that says, "You've already lost, you just don't know it yet." Then the judge looked down at me from her bench, tilted her head, and said words I never expected to hear. "You don't remember me, do you?" I had no idea what she meant. I had never met this woman in my life. But in the next 10 minutes, everything I thought I knew about that courtroom and about myself was about to change forever. My name is Sarah. I'm 31 years old, and I serve in the United States Army. Before any of that, before the uniform, before the discipline and the deployments, I was just a girl in a small house on Maple Street, raised by a father who worked 2 jobs, so I'd never go without. My mother passed when I was 7. After that, it was just me and Dad. He wasn't rich. He wasn't important to anyone outside our street. But that house, small, a little worn down, with a porch swing he built himself, was everything to me. Every memory I had of my childhood lived inside those walls. When my father passed away last year, the house was the one thing he left me. It was in his will, clear as day. My name, and only my name. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought grief would be the hardest part. I was wrong. My Uncle Richard was my father's older brother. Growing up, I barely saw him. He showed up at holidays sometimes, always with excuses about why he couldn't help when Dad was struggling to pay medical bills or keep the lights on. He was the brother who disappeared when things got hard. But the moment my father died, Richard reappeared. Not with flowers, not with kind words, with a lawyer. He claimed my father had promised him the house years ago, some verbal agreement, he said, made when they were young men, long before I was even born. No paper, no witness, just his word. I laughed the first time I heard it. It sounded so ridiculous I thought it was a bad joke. But Richard was serious. And worse, he had money behind him, enough to hire a sharp attorney who knew exactly how to twist a courtroom in his favor. I didn't have that kind of money. I had my army pay, my father's memory, and a stack of documents that proved the house was legally mine. I tried to find a lawyer. Every consultation cost more than I could afford on a soldier's salary. I called 3 attorneys. All 3 wanted retainers I simply didn't have. So I made a choice most people would call reckless. I decided to represent myself. The day of the hearing, I walked into that courtroom in my dress uniform, carrying a folder with my father's will, the deed, and every paper I could find. Richard's attorney barely looked at me. He whispered something to Richard, and they both smiled like the outcome was already decided. I sat down at the table alone. No one beside me, no one to lean on. Just the weight of my father's house resting on my shoulders. The bailiff called the case. My uncle's attorney stood up first, smooth and confident, ready to argue that a house built on love and sacrifice belonged to a man who never once helped pay for it. I felt my hands shake under the table, but I kept my back straight, the way the army trained me to. The judge walked in, a woman in her 50s, sharp eyes, steady voice. She reviewed the file for a moment before looking up. That's when she said it. "You don't remember me, do you?" I shook my head, confused. She let the silence sit for a moment before she continued. 15 years ago, I was a public defender, struggling, barely making rent. My car broke down outside a small auto shop on Maple Street. I didn't have enough money to fix it. A man there, your father, fixed it for free. He told me, "Pay it forward when you can." I never forgot that. The entire courtroom went quiet. Even Richard's attorney stopped shuffling his papers. She looked at Richard next, her voice turned firm. "This court does not rule based on personal history, but it does rule based on the law. And the law, in this case, is very clear." Here's the thing people don't expect from a story like this. I didn't need a scheme. I didn't need to trick anyone or plot behind closed doors. My revenge was simply the truth, laid out clearly, with nothing to hide. I presented the will. I presented the deed, filed years earlier in my father's name, transferred properly, legally, with my name listed as sole inheritor. I presented bank records showing I had helped pay the property taxes for the last 3 years while serving overseas, sending money home every single month. Richard's attorney tried to argue the verbal promise again, insisting a family agreement should outweigh legal paperwork. But there was no document, no witness, no proof, just a man's word against a mountain of official records. The judge listened patiently, but her expression made it clear she already knew where this was going. After both sides finished, the judge took a short recess. 20 minutes that felt like 20 years. When she returned, the courtroom fell silent again. "This case is simple," she began. "A legal will, a properly filed deed, and consistent financial contribution from the rightful heir. Against that, we have an unproven claim with no documentation whatsoever." She looked directly at Richard. "The court finds in favor of the respondent. The property remains solely owned by Sarah, as her father intended." Richard's face went pale. His attorney closed his folder without a word. Then the judge added one more thing, off the record but loud enough for the room to hear. "Your father was a good man. He would be proud of the woman sitting in this courtroom today, the one who stood here alone and still won." I walked out of that courthouse holding the folder that had protected everything my father worked for. Richard didn't even look at me as he left. He got into his expensive car and drove off, and I never heard from him again. I went back to Maple Street that evening. I sat on the porch swing my father built with his own hands, and for the first time since the funeral, I let myself cry. Not from grief, but from relief. The house was safe. My father's legacy was safe. And somehow, a small act of kindness he did 15 years earlier for a stranger with a broken-down car had come back to protect the one thing he loved most. People always say the world doesn't reward good deeds. But sometimes it does, just not when you expect it, and not in the way you imagined. My father never asked that woman for anything back. He fixed her car because it was the right thing to do. He never knew she would one day sit on a bench and decide the fate of the home he built his whole life around. If there's one thing this taught me, it's this. Kindness doesn't disappear. It waits, sometimes for years. And when you least expect it, it comes back to stand beside you, exactly when you need it most. If this story moved you, let me know in the comments. And if you believe good things eventually find their way back to good people, share this with someone who needs to hear it today.